These large fab facilities is what I think Santa Clarita should go after because it's about finance and labor as opposed to power prices. It plays to America's strengths and it plays to your strengths while ignoring most of the weaknesses that make other manufacturing efforts a reach for the area. You can tap the labor pool of Silicon Valley. You can tap the labor pool of greater Los Angeles without suffering from their transport weaknesses. And financing for something of this size will never be easier. Since coronavirus started, the US has already picked up its first new fab facility. It went to Phoenix. But there's another reason that I think you should target tech and tech manufacturing. Silicon Valley is about to get its butt handed to it. The Valley has placed all of its eggs in the globalization basket. Its entire manufacturing system is Asia centric, and it will lose its entire China footprint. These facilities must move. But better for you, Silicon Valley has lost its political cover here in the United States across the political spectrum. Now, the center left originally loved Silicon Valley because they were corporate titans with social agendas, remaking corporate America from within, or at least that's how the love affair started. But as information transmission became free, anything that impinged upon that transmission, upon that information flow, like, say, fact checking, Silicon Valley resisted to the end. The valley continued to disavow responsibility even when ISIS was beheading Americans on their IT platforms, even when posts were blaming California's wildfires on Antifa. The center left hasn't simply dropped its support for Silicon Valley. It now sees the valley as a threat to democracy itself. Very top of the list of people who matter, California's own Senator, Dianne Feinstein. What about the center right? The center right used to laud the valley as an example of what Americans could achieve in a low regulation environment with a new technology. But then Silicon Valley CEOs let their personal political views not simply shape corporate policy, but much of the valley committed to never working for the government for anything. Most notably, though, for the intelligence community and the Defense Department. But their services were still fully available for sale. So their work could benefit the militaries and civilian monitoring programs of Russia and China. In particular, the same companies that refused to work with the US government helped build the nuts and bolts of the monitoring system that allowed China's genocide in Xinjiang. So the center right now doesn't merely question the Valley's ideology or even their patriotism, but their sanity. What's left of the American pro business party is now anti Silicon Valley. Now, as much credence as there is to the points of the center left and the center right, and I broadly agree with both, the concerns of America's political extremists are actually even more valid. Simply put, for the radical right, it's Main Street versus Wall Street. The populist right thinks of Silicon Valley as the greatest job destroying machine in American history, and they are actually correct. But so's the radical left. Algorithms and robots don't pay taxes, but their output accrues to the operators and designers. The populist left views Silicon Valley as the top reason for America's wealth inequality, and they are right. The solution for all four factions, is to revoke the valley's unlimited license and enact some sort of constraining regulation. Everyone wants to break Silicon Valley's power. Everyone wants to repatriate tech manufacturing. And Silicon Valley doesn't have the cost structure or the physical room or the labor force to bring the manufacturing base to the Valley in specific or even the Bay Area in general. It has to go somewhere else. Enter Santa Clarita. It's going to happen fast when it happens. But I do want to end with one final point because it might happen even faster than any of us has ever dreamed or feared. And that has to do with American culture. This is how most Americans think of themselves. The pioneer era. This is our national myth. The idea that you could go out, you could start new, and with 6 months after starting a new plow, you could be exporting grain down the greater Mississippi to sell to Europe for a high amount of cash. The can do attitude. This is the source of it. But it does have a dark side. Because for 150 years, Americans saw their lives get better every single day. That's not normal. It was normal for us, but it's not normal. Sometimes the world punches you in the face. Sometimes you don't expect the change. And while other countries will take that in stride, where other cultures can adapt to such rapid shifts, we in the United States aren't very good at that. We think that the covenant with God has been broken. We think that the sky is going to fall. And when the world does touch us on its terms instead of ours, we panic. Now, if you're looking for someone to blame for this, oops, wrong way. I blame Canada because they were the first ones to do to us. Back in the War of 1812, they burned down our capital. Kind of a dick move, not something a good neighbor does. And as a result, we started on this pattern of reaction and overreaction. We've done it about 8 times in our history, every couple of generations. A few quick examples. 9/11 is probably the best one that's on everybody's mind right now. 3,000 dead, terrorist attack that came out of nowhere. As a side effect of our reaction to 9/11, we now have the sharp end of American power stationed on either side of every major trade and energy artery on the planet. My personal favorite is Sputnik, the beeping aluminum grapefruit. We were the head of the Russians in electronics, metallurgy, rocketry, but we wanted to make sure that whatever we threw up there was going to last. The Soviets didn't care. They just wanted to beat us to that one line. So the Sputnik went up, and 90 days later, it fell out of orbit. About the time it fell out of orbit, we launched our first satellite, Vanguard 1. It's still up there. We, however, retooled in a panic our entire industrial and educational base as a result of Sputnik. We coasted on that for 40 years. Well, folks, 9/11 was 19 years ago this month. We are going through some of the greatest changes human history has ever seen right now. To think that we're going to make it through the next few years without some sort of weird shock, I think is naive. And what's different this time is that the United States really doesn't care what the world looks like the next day. And if you think demographic shifts, the collapse of the order, and COVID are forcing rapid changes, that's nothing compared to what would happen if the United States actually went out there and knocked over the anthill. Over the next few months is we're going to have a vaccine for coronavirus, and we're going to have to manufacture it at volume. And every country that can manufacture it is undoubtedly going to try, excuse me, to keep as many of those doses within their own national borders as possible. That is going to light a fire under the American people and under Congress to change the way that we do drug manufacture. And a lot of that is going to be forced to come back to the United States. That is honestly, whoever the first mover is on that in the United States is going to get most of it. Santa Clarita could go for that. I'm not sure you've got the massive competitive advantage there, but it is something to consider. The second piece, and I think something that you are probably better positioned for, is going for the higher end, the research and development of new drugs in the first place. Santa Clarita already has a reasonably large medical devices industry. Tijuana, which also has one, is not that far away. And partnership with universities and hospitals does not require immediate proximity. That is something where you already have some of the institutional and labor infrastructure in place that you can naturally expand into related sectors like drug development, especially things like biologics.